everybody. Reporting to you again from the Glamour City, Hollywood.
I know if I keep reviewing this project every month or so, I'm gonna kill it. Every time I see it, I'm gonna want to kill it. So I'm telling you now, I will give you 1 year, and I will be back in a year. And this damn thing better work, or your desk is going to be in the parking lot, meaning you're fired. And then he walked out the door. And to his word, 1 year to the day later, he appeared back on his airplane in Raleigh from New York, where he worked. And we had the scanner working, and he came in and he picked up a pack of cigarettes that we had put a little label on, and he threw it spinning across the check stand, and it read it. And then he scratched his head. He was a great big guy. He's like 300 pounds, 6 foot tall, very big man. And he got down on his hands and knees and opened up the doors underneath the check stand to see if we didn't have some little engineer under there pushing buttons, illegally. and and so then when he saw just electronics, he said, "Okay," and he walked out to the car and came back with 3 bottles of Jack Daniels and congratulations. Of course, owning 3 bottles of Jack Daniels in IBM at that time would have gotten you fired immediately, but this was the president of the division.
If you love listening to this show, please consider giving a rating and a review on Amazon Alexa or wherever you listen. We want to continue bringing you this amazing content, and part of our ability to do that means that we need a big audience. Now, it may not seem like much, but rating and reviewing the show will help more people find us, just like how you found this show. Simply on any podcast platform, search for a show, scroll down to the bottom, and push 5 stars. It's that easy. Thanks for supporting the show. So today I'm joined by Paul McEnroe, developer of the Barcode, award-winning engineer, distinguished scholar, and IBM scientist, and the author of the Barcode. Welcome to the show today.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here.
Before we jump right into the Barcode, my understanding is that you spent most of your time in ranching in the Santa Ynez Valley in Central California coast. Is that right?
Well, most of the time since my retirement from the computer industry, which happened in 1994. Yeah, so exclusively from 94 to now, so almost 30 years.
And are we talking cattle? What are we talking here?
Cattle and horses. So I bred horses up until about 10 years ago. And then I retired also from the horse breeding business. And I bred European warm bloods for jumping and dressage and Olympic events. And then, but I always have had cattle. It's a working cattle ranch, and we still have the cattle. And I'm joined here today behind me by my 2 cow dogs who help me work the cows.
Oh, understood. Now, the horse breeding is it's actually high stakes, isn't it? And there's a lot of things that could go awry. Is that right?
Well, it's true. I the first 10 years, while I was still working on the Barcode and everything else in IBM, I was actually breeding horses and having fun with them with my children. And at that time, I was breeding race horses and taking them to the track. And now that's very risky. But I did a little bit of racing, but not much, and with partners. And but then I switched when I moved to California in 1984. Switched from IBM to Trilogy. I switched to breeding warm bloods, and it's just a situation where you pick nice stallions and nice mares, you breed good horses, and I've sold them all, mostly all, as young stock for other people to train and develop. So it's not too risky in that situation, and not too expensive. You get them bred and they look pretty and go nice, and then you send them to somebody else to see if they end up becoming a national or an international champion. And I was lucky enough to breed several international champions, but they were mostly shown and trained by people that bought them from me.
What an incredible experience. Now, I want to quickly talk about the cattle portion. And the reason I want to bring it up more for, I suppose, let's call it fun pride, in the sense that if you go to Australia, if you go to Japan, or even Korea, or different parts of the world, everybody believes that their cattle and their beef is the best quality. How would you describe your cattle?
So, first of all, I have what are called commercial cattle. So I don't breed, real quality, detailed individuals for breeding and that sort of thing. I buy bulls from people like that have very special bulls because you breed a bull to 20 cows each year, and so if and I have I've had nominally about 100 cows most of the time. Sometimes I had a few more, 50 more, and sometimes a few less when the drought came. But so you pay a lot of money for very good bulls because each year for 5 or 6 years you're going to get 20 calves from them. So 120 of your calves are going to come from one bull. The cows, I just buy good commercial quality cows, and I buy black baldies. Black cattle qualify for Angus. Angus does a lot of promotion and advertising, and you get a little bit more money when you sell them. And my cows are nice quality. And people have almost always, from the time I started ranching, bought my female cows, the cows that I sell as youngsters. They buy them for breeding their herds, for herding, so they don't get butchered. Of course, the steers, the males, they end up becoming steaks. But that's just the business.
Understood. And I'm sure the listeners are probably thinking, why are we talking about horse breeding and cows?
But
yeah, I will connect the tissues in the sense that I think what we're going to be talking about is this notion of how intentionally curated talents, pool or teams. Again, this is more in the context of researchers and scientists, and how how properly creating the right brain trust can really help store some incredible results. And that's really what I think we're talking about. So in that regard, it does have that connective tissue. Now, just a little bit of background about yourself. You've spearheaded and pioneered some incredible things, including the Universal Product Code, or UPC, and also known as simply Barcode. You've done a lot of different other types of commercial applications, including laser, barcode scanning, and the SKU that most of us are familiar with. You've been recognized by IBM for their SD President's Award for development of supermarket systems, including the Barcode in 1974. You also helped develop the token ring local area network, or something we just simply call as LAN these days. You've also played executive roles, including leading Trilogy Systems Corporation, and developed other multi-chip technologies. Please, I'll hand it over to you to tell us more.
Yes, well, I was very fortunate to be in the right place at the right time to do a lot of those things. I had good schooling. I grew up not well to do, but in the Midwest. My adopting father was a barber. I actually was adopted by a family at the age of 2, picked out of a lineup from an orphanage, and the couple that adopted me, whom I consider my parents, they treated me very well, very kind. They didn't have money, but they had love. And they sent me to good local schools. And then I was able to get jobs working as a teenager. And I was able to save up enough money to put myself through college because I got a job at the college. And that was a great job working for Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, doing electrical engineering work while I was studying electrical engineering at the University of Dayton. And after I got out of Dayton, I had done well there, so I got nice scholarships. I applied to 4 of the major colleges, 2 on the West Coast, Caltech and Stanford, and I got wonderful opportunities to go to school there. And I chose Stanford. Then I had to switch to Purdue because my father turned in poor health, and they were closer to him. And but then after a year there, I joined IBM and enrolled in Stanford as a part-time thing. And IBM gave me an opportunity to do work on scanning things, a lot of interesting things. One of the most that people like was scanning things on the head of a pin, or that were small enough to be on the head of a pin, let's just say, for the CIA and other things like that, which gave me the capability to later get to scanning barcodes for the supermarket application. And anyway, I was doing that. IBM wanted to expand their business. At that time, they were the largest company in the world from the point of view of profit and from the value of their stock. And the CEO of the company was very worried that there wasn't enough growth left in the IBM world in the mainframe computers. So he wanted to expand computing. And so he wanted to buy companies, but he was told you can't do that because if you go to Silicon Valley and buy a company, they'll know about IBM's blue suits and white shirts and black wingtip shoes and all of that, and also not a really great venture capital like of a stock option program. So he said, well, then find somebody in the company and get them to do that. So they picked me, maybe because I was in California, and most of the IBM engineers were not in California. I was in Silicon Valley at a think tank. And so that might have been one thing. And the other might have been that at Stanford, after finishing all the coursework for the PhD, I decided not to get the PhD and go into business. And so I had just finished the Stanford Grad School of Business program. So they saw that, plus I'm in Silicon Valley, plus I've been working there for 9 years. So they asked me to lead a team to start them in a new business that would expand the data required, so increase the opportunities for mainframe computers and so on. And so I got to pick the business, and with some help that I encouraged from other IBMers that got to help me with that, we decided to go into point of sale. And then a point of sale, particularly the supermarket part, they were beginning to recognize that they needed a way to mark items with a code, and so that they could do automatic inventory control and speed up their checkout. And I'm thinking, gee, I could do this scanning. I had grown up in Dayton, Ohio, in the shadow of NCR, so I was somewhat familiar with all of the point of sale thing. And so that's how I got into that. And so I did put a proposal together for IBM executives. I presented it, and I asked for a small amount of money, really $300,000 the first year, $1 million the second, to $3 million the third. And I was granted that money, and I hired with it a small team I picked out of IBMers. Mostly IBMers. We hired a couple of people from universities, and but that was later on. And I started off with just 6 guys, and over the course of several years, it grew up into several hundred. But it was a team, and it was a team effort. And I say that on the cover of the book. It's a story of the team that developed the barcode. And so we did come up with a code, and actually in the book as an appendix, I put the detailed proposal that we put out for the code in the back of the book with all the mathematical analysis. You don't have to read that if you're not interested in that, but that's why I put it in as an appendix rather than the main part of the book, which is nicely understood by the general public. And so, I was very fortunate to be there and have a company that had the capability that I could lean on, and I could go solicit guys to join my team, and ladies too. And we were very successful, and we were able to build the product, and it kind of went viral.
This is a fascinating story for a number of myriad of reasons. But first and foremost, you were at IBM for 23 years, so very long tenure. And it's interesting because it was a critical inflection point for IBM that was starting to see their cash cow effectively start to be somewhat decimated. They're looking for new growth engines. And I do think that the opportunity and luck was definitely on your side, but you also were properly ready to take on this challenge, not only from a geography and education, but also just where things were. So let's get into a little bit about the team itself. As you started to figure out what the initial use case was going to be, which is around POS, Talk to me about how you went about building that team and what was your selection criteria?
Well, I wanted to get people that were independent thinkers, that were innovative, and yet were uh, deep in terms of their understanding of their specialty and their level of expertise. So I had of the six people I started with. It turns out that I was asked to take the team or to build up the team in North Carolina rather than California, where I was. So I needed to move to North Carolina. The reason for that was that IBM had just built a new facility on 600 acres that they had purchased recently in the Research Triangle Park a couple of years before. The plant was already built, but not full. It needed other products to fill it up. So I was asked to go there. And so I went there, and they had been already moving people to that laboratory from other more classic IBM laboratories in upstate New York primarily. And I did go to the people there, and I found several that had just transferred in from upstate New York, Endicott, New York being a big IBM place. And a couple of them were communications engineers, and I knew I was going to need that because they have all the coding. Communications, you're sending bits down a line, electronic bits, ups and downs, in encoded form. And so I could see we were going to deal with a lot of coding. So that was an expertise that I wanted. And those two gentlemen, the first two that came in, one's name was Alex Soshenko and the other was Bill Betts. They actually defined a hub go-ahead system, which was not talked about at the time as a little local area network, but that's what it was, between the check stand and the back room. And that very same technology is what a decade later, after the Barcode was successful, I converted in to become the token ring. I just increased the speed of it by several orders of magnitude and put wider addressing in. Another gentleman I got who also came from up in New York was Mort Powell, who had experience at manufacturing and knowing how do you build things so that they're easily manufactured, because we had to have low cost. And he knew people. And so another gentleman that we got from up there who Mort Powell had known was George Lauer. And George was also, he had done both printing and communications and card handling, card stock. Remember all the old IBM cards, that everybody used to put in their time clock and that you got paid with from time to time and everything, the typical IBM card. And he was a very good at that. And I put him in charge of the design specifications, not just the invention, but the design specifications for the barcode, like what encoding are we going to use, and so on and so forth, between the binary coded decimal stuff and the numeric numbers and so on. And then I was very fortunate. IBM had tried to do this kind of thing earlier, about 5-10 years earlier, and they finished up about 3 years earlier in their Minnesota laboratory in Rochester, Minnesota. And I went up there and studied that project. And why did it fail? Well, it failed because a lot of technology wasn't available to them at that particular point in time. But they were trying to build more of an old classic thing, like the typical NCR cash register made out of iron and a lot of printing parts and heavy, but not with integrated circuits or anything like that. And this young gentleman, his name was Roger Kaus, was a brilliant kid. He was in his 20s, and he had designed for them an idea using the latest techniques in circuitry. By the way, we're talking circuitry of a few hundred possible circuits per chip, not a few hundred million. This is 50 years ago, actually longer than that. It was 1969. And so I hired him because I loved his design ideas that weren't accepted by that other group. And for good reason. It wasn't as easy to implement 5 years before. but I brought him down. And then I got a wonderful gentleman named Len Felton to help me with the management and the design of. On the tabletop. We put, just think about it for a minute, a stored program computer inside of a little box with a display and a printer and a reader, a card reader, a scanner. It sounds a lot like a PC, doesn't it? And basically, it was all the components of a PC, but PC wasn't a word that had been used or thought of. This is a decade before the PC came out. So almost a decade. So that was the first team that I got, and those were the skills that they had, and found that very helpful.
So as I'm listening, I can't help but to smile because I see a real story, true story inspired Netflix potentially becoming a reality for you. And I love the fact that you've actually used real names, and it helps bring the story alive, doesn't it? And coming back to what we were talking about at the onset is, we're really talking about selection. How do you actually build the right team? And just to put this in more modern context, we are, working on things like quantum computing. We're working on things like space satellites and launch vehicles. We're working on generative AI and moving towards artificial general intelligence. All of these large areas of what we call deep tech or scientific areas requires curating and selecting the right people. There are a number of things you mentioned: deep domain experts, independent thinkers. But one of the things that came up in my mind was this notion of maverick. I think you pointed out a really great example of why entrepreneur and even R&D and labs within these large companies today struggle. And it's because they're trying to work with what they know, what the current state is, without taking that leap, the next leap. And sometimes it's because we're missing the maverick. And sometimes the leadership is missing the maverick because they're not willing to work with those outliers that are thinking differently, that are potentially 5-10 years ahead. So talk to me about this notion of working with outliers, including yourself, and being a maverick. And how do you convince or persuade or influence the board of directors, the committees, the decision makers higher up that may be stuck in an old dogmatic approach that is what they know from a construct?
Yeah, that's a really good point. The maverick I was thinking of that came from the previous story was the gentleman up in Rochester, Minnesota, the young kid who had this brilliant idea that nobody else accepted, uh, and uh, and that was really a far out thing. And I was able to maybe, even though I wasn't so brilliant, I was able to see that new technology might just make that work, and we should try that. And so I brought him down and got him talking too. And so there we saw, okay, there's hints in technology. You mentioned all the things today, AI, this, that, and the other thing. In that day, it was integrated circuits. IBM hadn't built an integrated circuit before that. They had 6 different transistors on a different module, but it wasn't an integrated circuit at all. They weren't made at the same time. And so that was innovative. But there were so many different examples of things like that we jumped into. So Roger Kaus was the first example that I got of that. Another one was the scanning. I had built all kinds of scanners. I scanned some stuff for the post office, scanning zip codes. I built big scanners for where we couldn't even write on the surface because we didn't have enough intensity, except by using a direct beam from an electron beam to write with, and so on. But anyway, I got down to the point where, yeah, here's the barcode, and I just as you know it today, and we're going to scan it. And the Supermarket Institute said they wanted it scanned at 100 inches a second, sliding across the tabletop in the store, the counter, and it had to be 6 inches off the screen, and you couldn't orient it, and it might even be spinning, and it might be covered with plastic, and it might have some frost on it, and all that kind of stuff. And so I put together a plan to do that, and I got a couple of these innovative guys to work on it, and we talked about different ideas. And then the division president changed on me. The guy that had been there before, when I was granted the money I told you about before, he left to go to a bigger job, and I got a new guy. And the new guy was a really tough guy, but he was a bright engineer, but he was tough as nails, and had a Navy mouth and so on and so forth, as they say. And so he came down, and I took him into the laboratory, and I showed him what we were proposing to do. And we had a model made up, but it didn't work. And he said, "That's the most preposterous idea I've ever heard in my whole life." He said, "This is just a waste of money." Put this in the book, by the way. And he said, "But you have a good reputation. You've made some stuff work that I didn't think also didn't think would work. So I know if I keep reviewing this project every month or so, I'm gonna kill it. Every time I see it, I'm gonna want to kill it. So I'm telling you now, I will give you 1 year, and I will be back in a year. And this damn thing better work, or your desk is going to be in the parking lot, meaning you're fired." And then he walked out the door. And to his word, 1 year to the day later, he appeared back on his airplane in Raleigh from New York, where he worked. And we had the scanner working, and he came in and he picked up a pack of cigarettes that we had put a little label on, and he threw it spinning across the check stand, and it read it. And then he scratched his head. He was a great big guy. He's like 300 pounds, 6 foot tall, very big man. And he got down on his hands and knees and opened up the doors underneath the check stand to see if we didn't have some little engineer under there pushing buttons, illegally. And so then when he saw just electronics, he said, "Okay." And he walked out to the car and came back with 3 bottles of Jack Daniels, and congratulations. Of course, owning 3 bottles of Jack Daniels in IBM at that time would have gotten you fired immediately, but this was the president of the division. He was a rogue, but he left us alone for a year, and we got it done. So I think one of the answers to your question is you start with people that have had some evidence that they can be successful, that they're going to do things. And then if they come up with ideas that make some sense, you have to trust them, and you have to let them do their thing. And that's kind of what they let us do.
Well, it is an incredible story. And again, I'm telling you, this needs to be made into a Netflix-inspired movie. One of the things that comes to mind is this notion that sometimes many corporations will have pretty reasonably sizable R&D budgets. And I can't mention the name, but a very large blue chip software company had their own AI team. But when companies like OpenAI started to take the lead, they effectively divested their own internal team and took on a partnership with OpenAI. How do we reconcile the fact that these larger companies have trouble with innovation for a number of reasons, including some of the personality, what we call hippo, where the leader that happens to be in the room doesn't really appreciate or understand or really cares a hoot about what they're doing. But yet the world is moving towards that direction. Is the answer that innovation needs to happen outside of a big organization and then acquire that startup? Or can large institutions still continue to innovate?
Several people who have read my book and studied the thing made the comment that, gee, could anybody other than IBM have pulled this off? Because, what they were thinking was, in the process, there were several ancillary technologies that IBM had that really made it work. I mean, one of them was all these communications engineers. Another one was magnetic engineers. We were really the leader of the world in magnetics at that time, and disc recorders, and the capability to answer to all of the scans at 40 different check stands in the front of a store with all the data we had was beyond the art of disk drives at that time. So I got friends that I had done favors for in IBM before, which is a very good thing to do. Don't make enemies, don't burn your bridges. And they developed that technology for us, and that really helped, and that caused some of these people to say, "Gee, if you weren't IBM, would you have been able to do this?" I think the answer is we would have been able to, but it would have been harder. So, can big companies do it? They can if they have the right individuals. But if you just have individuals, that want to get rich and make money and own everything, exclusively, that makes it hard. And there are more innovative capabilities in smaller companies. I think I managed a smaller company, was Trilogy, which was Gene Amdahl had founded that after founding Amdahl Corporation, and we had 1,000 engineers. So you might not call that real small, but they were 1,000 of the best engineers in the country, and Gene Amdahl had brought them there. He was one of the most famous computer engineers of all time. And he would call people up and say, "Do you want to be a part of the biggest, most promising program in the history of computing right now or not?" And people left companies like IBM and General Motors and Fairchild and Intel and so on and so forth to come and work. And but they didn't have everything required to close the deal. And they also didn't have, I went there as vice president of development, engineering, and chief technical officer, and immediately did an audit of the system. And I found out the system that they had really, it was going to work, but 2 years later and a lot of money later. Now, I would have figured that out sooner in IBM because I would have had more capability to call on to do detailed analysis. I wouldn't have gotten to within 2 years of the ship date and realized that, it's going to cost too much and so on and so forth. It's feasible, but it's going to cost too much. And so I think the answer to your question is yes, it can happen in bigger corporations, but you have to have just the right people, and you have to have the right motivation. And that was our case, but it isn't always the case. And I think it's a real good question to ask in this whole AI world, which is both opportunistic but scary.
Yes. And we're going to get into that in just a second. So we do have a couple of minutes left. So I'm just going to do a quick summary and then ask the final question and give you about a minute or so. Now, one of the things that I think is subcontext, but we haven't actually explicitly called it out, is that one of the reasons for the success of the barcode was really economics. I mean, beyond all the laser technologies, the reading capabilities, to the barcode itself, at the end of the day, sometimes we as technologists get kind of lost in the shiny whiz-bang technology, but the broad-based adoption to really happen like it's done with the barcode, we really need to address the micro and the macroeconomics, doesn't it? Again, that's more rhetorical than anything else. But the final question that I have for you, and we only have about a minute, is to your point, we are at a point where you got exponential technology that's colliding together. Generative AI is a form of technology that goes across different multimodals. However, we're very much accelerating the path towards artificial general intelligence, or what we refer to as a singularity event. What do you foresee as that next breakthrough technology or technologies or inflection point for humanity?
Yeah, I think it may come in AI. I think that there are so many opportunities. I have sort of a view of AI that I got when we were trying to use a form of AI 30, 40 years ago in the laboratories at IBM, which we did. And it's just that computers get so fast. You can try so many things. You can guess so fast that you have to have a whole new way of thinking. You can't think like humans think, because we get an idea and then we develop the idea and everything. But with a form of AI, not all forms, but a form of AI, you can just guess. You can guess 100 million times. You can guess 1 billion times. And if you could imagine that, if you could guess 1 billion times in a few seconds, just think of all the answers you could come up with to crazy problems if you had a way to know what's the right answer. And that's, a way that it works. So That's why it's so promising, but it's a different kind of thought process than the typical standard human thought process. So, of course, I'm very naive about that. I'm 86 years old, and I see what we've done in the past, and we did do some tries at AI as well as we were coming a long way. But I don't know what the right answers are and which is the way to go, but I think we need to get the top people in the world to think about both how we go about it and how we manage it and how we limit it yet exploit it. And you just got to get the best people to focus on that. People that don't want to make millions of dollars in AI, but people that want the world to be a better place.
On a great note, I have been joined by Paul McEnroe, author of The Barcode. Thanks for joining today.
Thank you. I enjoyed it very much.
If you've enjoyed this episode, take a moment to rate our show on any podcast platform that you listen to. Scroll down to the bottom and push 5 stars. It's that easy. And as always, thanks for listening.